Good morning, honored guests. It's very nice to see that the sides have been rolled up and we have lovely weather. Bit of a natural air conditioning system here. I was in a room earlier that was a bit warmer, so that's why my tie is off. And I encourage you to go one step further than our moderator has encouraged us. Drop your ties if you want to. Many of you will be from outside of South Africa, and you might feel strangely familiar, strangely welcome in this part of the world. And as I said to my colleagues from WWF across the world, because we have a fairly significant contingent here, you're bound to feel at home because this is where your genetic roots lie. Southern Africa is the cradle of humankind, and you've, as it were, come home. So welcome. I could repeat a lot of what has been said in most of the introductions, but bear with me. 2 degrees is what we keep hammering on about. We want to keep pushing through the message that the science is very clear. The politics is still completely out of step, but the science is absolutely crystal clear. We've got to bend the curve back. We've got a peak in greenhouse gas emissions by 2015. That's what the science tells us. Now, what is the science? The science in this case provides us with broad signals. We're heading for a hairpin bend. Think about the logic in your own life. I was going to ask, is there anyone who drives a Ferrari? But since this is a largely business meeting, there might be some hands that go up. But let's think about it. We're driving nice and fast. The speed limit is 120 kilometers. We're doing 140, as most of us would do in a fast car. We know there's a hairpin bend ahead. We keep going. The speed signals say 100, but we keep going at 140. The next signal, and as you can see, these are the timelines, tell us 80, then 60 kilometers. We go into the hairpin bend. That tells us we should be negotiating that at about 30 kilometers an hour because it's a very sharp bend. We continue at 140. And that's largely because we want to beat another Ferrari or another car that's driving into the bend with us. We're not sure that we have the capacity to brake from 140 to 30 when we suddenly realize that we're going to wipe ourselves out. So this is what we're facing. Why do we talk about carbon, greenhouse gas emissions all the time? Well, we talk certainly where we sit in Africa and in the developing part of the world. We talk about a 2-degree limit and a peak in greenhouse gas emissions from the perspective of what is going to happen to people. People in Africa, people in other parts of the developing world, as well as every single one of us here. So this is not about some kind of ego trip of environmentalists where they've latched onto something and want to cry wolf. We're really talking for real here. In 2050, we're heading for a world population of about 10 billion people. And that's where we're likely to peak. My daughter will be my age in 2050. She'll live at a time when there'll be more human beings living at that one instance than will ever have lived cumulatively before that. By 2050, hopefully, many people who currently live in poverty will have been lifted out of that. So there's an increase in consumption pattern as well. Many of us live the ecological footprint lives of 10 to 30 to 50 people. So it's not just a body count, it's also a consumption count. And this is the realization that organizations like WWF and our sister organizations face. That's why we not only protect our magnificent species and biodiversity, but why we also care about people as we head into this. This is about food, water, energy for everyone. Many of our people do not have energy. There are figures of around 1 billion people currently don't have access to electricity. So while that might not ring true to anyone in this audience, because most of us would not come from those backgrounds, we have to understand that we're bound together, and that when we take our jackets off, when we drop the businessman or the government, the minister or government official cloak, we go home as individuals. We are people, and we can never drop the commitment that comes from being an individual and a human being. Africa is disproportionately impacted, as was mentioned by our moderator. There are projections, and we can go through many of them. I'll use one. By 2020, it's projected that there'll be a reduction by half of Africa's ability to produce crops. This is not only Africa's problem, this is everyone's problem. Many of us can buffer ourselves, we can incur greater cost, we can turn the air conditioning up, but for many people, and especially those in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, those options don't exist. So we see a lot of hot air, as it were, come out of the negotiations. We don't know where that's going. We hear positive signs. We're very eager to grab onto every little bit of good news. We get our hopes high and then they get shattered. Basically, it is clear that the governments and the government officials who are here at COP17 don't really know why they're here. We, as representatives of NGOs, we know why we're here. I think and I sense that business knows why it's here, and that is very pleasing. But we have to talk about the scale of the commitment that we're thinking of. I heard people earlier in presentations talk about, by a certain date, 20% of our investments will be, let's say, green-proofed. The scale might not be there. So where we're thinking at the moment is not where we have to be. And I certainly heard some very encouraging noises in the session on finance just before this. So what we are looking at is a radical change in which business conducts itself. And we know that businesses are natural innovators. It doesn't take me to tell you that. The recent report by UNEP on bridging the emissions gap demonstrates clearly that we can reduce emissions to the required levels with the technologies available. So we don't have to invest in new technologies, not that we're going to stand still on that front, but that's not what's required. It's now the follow-through. And since the people in the grey suits inside the bowels of the ICC seem to be allowing this window of opportunity to pass us by, the challenge is here for business to step forward and take the lead. We need business to lead the way in demonstrating that a low-carbon economy is feasible, but not only feasible, because you also have to generate profit. And that is certainly where a lot of the thinking that I've been exposed to in this meeting so far seems to be going. Let me close. I think that where governments are procrastinating, business must and will step in, and it will do so decisively. And that mantle rests on many of us sitting here in this tent today. We do not want to come out of Durban binding ourselves legally or otherwise to a 4-degree warming future. That is not something we want to contemplate, because that doesn't make business sense, and it doesn't make sense for us as individual human beings who care about those around us. Thank you very much.